Chapter 372. A Muslim Girl in the West, Section 25. Dr. Ibtihal was so disappointed and discouraged by the words of Sheikh Abdullah al-Badra'i. She scared that the terrorists might follow his advice and murdered her lover. She did what they wanted her to do, but her repentance and reconversion was rejected. Instead, she was accused of insulting the Prophet of Islam. According to the Sharia law, she had committed the unpardonable sin. The Prophet Muhammad ordered that any Muslim criticized him or insult him must be put to death, even if he or she is found holding to the curtains or coverings of the holy Kaaba at Mecca. Nonetheless, Dr. Ibtihal wasn't as much afraid of the fatwa that issued against her and permitted the shedding of her blood, as she was worried about the safety of her captive lover, Dr. Samir. She dedicated 3 days of fasting and praying for a divine intervention. She cried to God and asked him to free her lover from the hands of those ruthless ISIS terrorists. The Muslim terrorists called her for the 3rd time. This time they came up with almost an impossible demand. They informed Dr. Ibtihal that they were ready to accept her repentance and reconversion to Islam if she would prove to them it was genuine. They said further that she might have just faked it in order to save her lover. How could they know that she was not going to change her mind later on, turn again against Islam, and attack it? In order to prove that she was genuine, they demanded that she should go back to her country, Sudan, and live a normal life. She should stay away from any religious discussion or argument. If she would do that, they would release her lover. Otherwise, they threatened that she would soon receive in her mailbox a video showing how the lions of jihad had beheaded her Christian lover. Dr. Ibtihal's life was turned upside down when she heard that message in her answering machine. She ran once again to the police and sought their help. The FBI police told her the same thing, that she shouldn't have entered into any bargaining with the jihadist terrorists from the beginning. The police understood that the terrorists wanted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The terrorists understood that Dr. Ibtihal was prepared to do anything to save her lover. This time they wanted to blackmail her by forcing her to go back to her country and got her killed by the religious court in Sudan. Accordingly, the American police advised her to stop following their conditions anymore. Dr. Ibtihal once again rejected the advice of the FBI police and looked for a way to get back to her country. She went to the immigration office and requested them to help her to return to her motherland. The immigration office told her that because she came to the States as a refugee, she wouldn't be able to go out of the USA unless she would obtain the American citizenship first, after 5 years, and then get a passport. Dr. Ibtihal went next to the Red Cross office and requested them to issue to her emergency documents to help her to return to her country. The Red Cross office refused her request and told her that they were not allowed to issue such documents except for refugees who were traveling to a country other than their country of origin. When all doors were closed on her face, Dr. Ibtihal decided to knock on the last door that she had never expected she would step near it again. She decided to go to the Sudanese embassy and asked them to help her to return to her country. Wherefore, she phoned the Sudanese embassy in Washington and lied to them. She told them that she came to the States for a visit, but her passport got stolen. She wanted them to issue to her some official papers or passport to help her to return to Sudan. The embassy told her that they would not issue any such papers unless she come for interview and verify her claim to be a Sudanese citizen. While Dr. Ibtihal was going through that difficult time in her life, a fragile treaty was recently signed between the Sudanese People Liberation Army, SPLA, of the south of Sudan's rebels and the Islamic Front government of Khartoum. Many people in Sudan believed that the 2 parties were forced by America to sign that fragile treaty. Such a fragile treaty would ultimately divide Sudan into 2 separate countries. In order to prove to America that the generals in Khartoum were genuine in their willingness to live peacefully with the southern rebels, the government of Sudan did a few unusual anti-Islamic things. They made the vice president of Sudan from one of the leaders of the southern rebels. They gave some southern leaders the leaderships of some few insignificant ministries. They appointed the ambassador of Sudan in USA from the south too. According to the Islamic Sharia law, the non-Muslim in a Muslim country could not be a leader of any kind. In spite of that, the Islamic Front government of Sudan showed blind eyes to the Sharia law in order to wipe the stigma of sheltering Osama bin Laden in Sudan from 1992 to 1996 before he fled to Afghanistan. It also wanted the USA to erase the name of Sudan from the list of the 7 Muslim countries that support Islamic terrorism. In addition to all these, it did not want the USA to interfere or send troops to stop the ongoing genocide in Darfur. When Dr. Ibtihal appeared for her interviewer happened to be the ambassador himself. The ambassador was originally a rebel from the south and a Christian. He knew already the case of Dr. Ibtihal from A to Z. He followed her case when it was in Sudan, in Athens, and until her last appearance in the Al Jazeera TV. He used to admire the courage and boldness of Dr. Ibtihal, but her recent appearances in the Arab TV puzzled him. Because of that, he wanted to know why she suddenly changed and began to behave in bizarre manner. Usually he never conducted interviews but left them for employees lower than him. In the case of Dr. Ibtihal, he wanted to know for himself why she changed. Dr. Ibtihal's sudden changes did not pass unnoticed by the media. Some American as well as Arab medias wrote extensively on her recent couple of appearances in Al Jazeera TV. The ambassador of the Sudanese embassy in Washington leaked to the media her request to obtain some documents to assist her returning to her country. There was a concern about her safety among some media people. Some of them wrote in their newspapers that the fatwa of al-Sheikh al-Badra'i exposed Dr. Ibtihal to an imminent danger. Besides that, Dr. Ibtihal had already been condemned to death by the Islamic court in Khartoum. For that reason, some media people tried to find from Dr. Ibtihal why she was taking such a risky step by trying to return to a country where she was condemned to death for her conversion. Dr. Ibtihal refused to tell anyone the reasons for her decision to go back to her country. When her case became hotly debated issue, someone from the FBI leaked the terrorists' blackmailing of Dr. Ibtihal. When the public in America came to know what was the driving force that led Dr. Ibtihal to make all those compromises and sacrifices, there was general demand that the FBI police should stop her from returning to her country against her wish. The FBI police argued that they could stop her from returning to her country of origin only if she had already become an American citizen. They had the obligation to protect her in the States, but they would not be able to prevent her from going back to her country if the Sudanese embassy issued her traveling papers. Some human rights activists argued the case of Dr. Ibtihal in this manner. Dr. Ibtihal at present did not belong to any country. She was the citizen of the world. Therefore, the world should stop her from killing herself. Some religious groups such as Christians, Jews, and Hindus contested that all religions in the world forbid suicide. Accordingly, Dr. Ibtihal should be stopped by the FBI police for committing suicide. Dr. Ibtihal was blamed by the media for negotiating with the jihadist terrorists and was requested to refrain from surrounding her life to them. Her decision to return to her country would only give victory to the jihadist terrorists. Concerning her captive lover, the public pleaded with the FBI and police in Chad to try to find where the terrorists were holding him and hence rescue him. After the interview, the ambassador of the Sudanese embassy rejected Dr. Ibtihal's request for obtaining traveling documents. The ambassador refused her request on the ground that she could not able to provide any evidences that she entered the States with a Sudanese passport. On the contrary, the ambassador told Dr. Ibtihal he had all the proofs that she entered the USA as a refugee. Moreover, he told her that she lied in her application and during the interview that her Sudanese passport got stolen. In fact, the ambassador did all this in order to save the life of Dr. Ibtihal. The decision of the Sudanese ambassador was met with uproar and protests among the Sudanese people in Sudan. Some top officials in the government in Khartoum threatened to remove the ambassador from his position if he would not issue traveling documents to Dr. Ibtihal within 48 hours. They also threatened to prosecute him when he would come back to Sudan. Being intimidated with such threats, the ambassador retracted his former decision and issued traveling papers to Dr. Ibtihal. The embassy also issued a one-way ticket to her. As soon as she received the traveling papers and the ticket, Dr. Ibtihal booked her flight to Sudan. Her trip was scheduled to follow the route from Chicago to London and from London to Khartoum. There were so many protests from the media and the public when the Sudanese embassy had issued traveling documents and ticket to Dr. Ibtihal. Some protesters approached the Sudanese embassy and shouted their condemnation of the ambassador. They accused the Christian ambassador of being accomplice with the terrorist government of Khartoum. They called him truth hater and bloodshedder. Some former Sudanese and Arabic church members contacted Dr. Ibtihal and begged her to cancel her trip to Sudan. Dr. Ibtihal stood firmly on her decision to return to Sudan and save her lover from being unjustly beheaded for her own actions. Some people considered Dr. Ibtihal's decision to be heroic and sacrificial. Those people wrote in the media that Dr. Ibtihal should be a model of bravery and sacrifice. If the religious fanatics in Sudan would kill her, she should be crowned the modern goddess of the erotic love. The Muslim world considered the decision of Dr. Ibtihal was a divine intervention. They believed that Allah used the kidnap of her Christian man in order to bring her back to her country to face the death punishment for insulting their gracious Prophet Muhammad. Some Sudanese religious leaders spoke in their Friday prayer sermons and said the accursed woman should be stoned to death as soon as she arrived in the Khartoum airport. They also urged the Lions of Jihad to bring the Christian man to Sudan to be tried and punished. They said the Christian man conspired with some gunmen against the late Mu'allana, Noor al-Huda Zayn al-Abidin Saif al-Dawla, and made him to be hanged deceitfully by some coward women. On the day Dr. Ibtihal went to the airport to board her flight to Sudan, many media people and public came to meet her. Some women begged her to cancel her trip to Khartoum. Some of them cried and held her hands and tried to prevent her from advancing inside the departure hall. Dr. Ibtihal responded to them in tears. She told them that she would not forgive herself forever if she cancelled her flight and allowed the terrorists to behead her lover. She told them further that she would blame herself for his unjust murder. Dr. Ibtihal asked the police to help her to reach her plane. The cops freed her hands by force from some people who insisted that she shouldn't travel to Sudan. Dr. Ibtihal entered the plane with eyes flooded with tears. She felt as if she was like an innocent lamb that submitted herself to her slaughters. She expected many things to happen on her arrival in Sudan. She anticipated that the angry crowd of Sudanese Muslims at the Khartoum airport might stone her to death for speaking against their religion and insulting their prophet. She also thought she might be placed under arrest at the airport. She knew that she would be retried again and condemned to death for speaking against Islam and insulting the Prophet Muhammad. She scared that terrorists might not keep their word and behead her lover as soon as they would come to know that her feet had touched the Sudanese soil. The Al Jazeera TV was able to interview the President of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, regarding the return of Dr. Ibtihal to her country and what might happen to her. The President said that the Ministry of the Religious Affairs in Sudan and the Mufti of the country had already decided what should be the decision of the Sharia court regarding the speeches and the debate that Dr. Ibtihal had spoken in public concerning the Holy Quran and the gracious Prophet Muhammad. He said further that the decision had not been disclosed to him as yet and no one else knew about it except the Mufti and the elected committee members of the Ministry of the Religious Affairs. The Al Jazeera TV asked the President whether the Mufti and the committee members had recognized the fatwa of al-Sheikh al-Badra'i and made their decision accordingly. The President replied that the Ministry of the Religious Affairs in Sudan in the past respected every fatwa made by a qualified Muslim scholar as long as his decision was based on the Quran and the Blessed Sunnah of the gracious Prophet Muhammad. Dr. Ibtihal's plane landed on the Khartoum airport as scheduled at 9:30 a.m. The airport was so crowded that the passengers of the plane could not see beneath them any empty space when the plane reached at the building's level. Almost everybody in the capital city of Sudan came to the airport to condemn the accursed woman. It was a Friday morning when the Sudanese aircraft's tires touched the runway and began to taxi towards the main building of the airport. There was great concern about the safety of the flying crew and the passengers of the plane. Every cop in the capital city was deployed at the airport. The government sought the help of big number from the military soldiers. The public was warned in advance that no one should throw stone or try to assault Dr. Ibtihal when she arrived at the airport. The policemen and the military soldiers were given permission to fire at anyone who would try to disobey those orders. As soon as the passengers of the plane began to emerge out and make their way down the ladder, the crowd began to shout their denunciation and condemnation of the accursed woman. Their shouting turned into screaming and cursing as soon as the passengers reached the arrival hall. The crowd could not distinguish among the passengers who were Dr. Ibtihal. Every young woman was received with insults and condemnation. The police authority was confused too. They could not know who was Dr. Ibtihal among the female passengers, therefore all the women in that flight were detained and transferred to unknown destination. Shortly after that, the police authority announced that Dr. Ibtihal was arrested. The crowd was disappointed because it could not stone the accursed woman. Even so, the crowd was appeased and pleased when it learned that Dr. Ibtihal was arrested. Some religious leaders led mobs and went around the city shouting slogans against Dr. Ibtihal. After appeasing their anger through shouting and condemning, the crowd entered different mosques in the city to perform the Friday public prayer. On that Friday prayer, every imam preached his sermon concerning the punishment of Allah to those who waged war against Allah and His Prophet. All the imams condemned Dr. Ibtihal by name and called her abuser of the Prophet. They told their congregation that the Muslim man or woman could be pardoned by the Sharia law if he committed serious blasphemies such as insulting Allah and the religion of Islam. The only unpardonable blasphemy according to the Sharia law was insulting and abusing the gracious Prophet Muhammad. The Imams quoted the examples of the people whom the Prophet ordered their murder even if they were found holding to the coverings of the shrine Kaaba. Accordingly all of them demanded that Dr. Ibtihal to be executed as soon as possible.